As I mentioned on Monday, this is our third year partnering with City Business and its Women of the Year honorees on this event. And the event is meant to empower and promote mentorship amongst professional women at all stages of their careers. Uh, this morning, we will spend time learning, sharing, growing, and hopefully encouraging you all to empower one another. Before we start, I do want to thank our sponsors for their support in making today and Monday possible. First, our title sponsor, Ochsner Health, our silver sponsor, Entergy New Orleans, and our bronze sponsors, the Loyola University Women's Leadership Academy, Fisher Phillips, and Gulf Coast Bank. For those who are not familiar, JA is an organization that's committed to teaching young people about financial literacy, entrepreneurship, work readiness, and we do that in a 13 parish area in and around the city of New Orleans. This year, we're going to reach about 15,000 students with our program, with our programs, and I'm excited that we actually have one of those students here this morning that we're going to talk to. Zion Slater is a junior at Warren Easton Charter School in New Orleans, and he's participated in a couple of our programs. So excited to talk with him and have him share his experience with you guys. So good morning, Zion.
Good morning. Hope everybody's doing good this morning. And hi, Mr. Washington.
I know I'm doing good. I hope you're doing well too. And it's not starting to rain, so I'm going to claim that to be a good morning for all of us as of right now. Right? So Zion, I know you've participated in both our Finance Park program, and you also participated 2 years in a row in our summer internship prep program. If you could just share with us, what were some of your biggest takeaways from those experiences?
My biggest takeaways from the 2 years in junior achievement is that I actually learned how to save better, understand financial freedom better, and what I need to get understand how to get financial freedom and be able to spend my money the way I like.
I love to hear that. I think even as adults, sometimes we struggle with the idea of saving, even though we know it's important. So I think it's really cool that you learned that so early and figuring out how to apply that. And speaking of, how do you see yourself applying some of the things that you've learned, either in the Finance Park program or in the internship prep program that you've done for the past 2 summers?
I see myself applying some of these things. Well, most of everything I learned, but of course, saving, that's one vital thing I need in life. Because without saving, I most likely be in debt. And getting out of debt, I learned some of the foundations of getting out of debt. But the program that they had, it was like a game simulator, and so I learned that didn't want to spend too much money. And so as I was going through the game, I was thinking what could help me not spend so much, the best routes, and yeah. Also, I can apply this most likely in my everyday life too by thinking, is if it's cheaper, is it a little better than this?
Yeah, I would say I probably can get some tips from you on how to make better choices on spending. So maybe I'll text you later. You can give me some advice on that. And so, Zion, the last question I have for you is, last week or maybe the week before when I sat in on the internship prep program, I heard you give a 30-second elevator pitch about mentorship. And so today, this program is about fostering mentorship relationships for professional women. And so I'm just curious, for you, why do you think it's important for you as a young person to begin those type of mentor relationships now?
Well, me as a young person, I think it's important that we have somebody that could be our mentor or somebody that we could learn from, but to we've reached all that we can learn. Well, we can build on from them, learn from them. We can try to not make the same mistakes they did and become better and just keep learning.
That's awesome. And it's funny you put it that way. On Monday, one of our speakers said something to that same effect, that she looked at her mentorship relationships as an opportunity to learn and not repeat those same mistakes. And so you're already figuring that out. So I think that's awesome. Ryan, thanks for your time this morning. And I told you I would tell folks this, and so I saved it to the end, right? Uh, a year ago when Zion started this program, he would have not been able to get on here and talk to us. So I appreciate the growth that you've had, and that we've been a part of that growth. So thanks again, Zion. Enjoy the rest of your morning, and then we're gonna finish off the rest of the program.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you, Mr. Washington.
Thank you, sir. All right, so to kick off the rest of our program, I'm going to introduce Deidre Diaz, the Vice President of Health and Wellness Solutions for Ochsner Health. Deidre, take it away.
Good morning, Larry, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Zion. So great to see JA in action. I'm thrilled to be back this morning as your moderator, and hope you guys are excited as we are. Thank you for your attendance and active participation on Monday. And also thank you so much for the feedback. We've worked and incorporated that into our programming this morning. So as I mentioned Monday, in addition to my role at Ochsner, I'm also honored to serve both as a member of the Junior Achievement Board of Governors, as well as the co-chair and MC for this Empower 2021 event today. Our agenda is jam-packed with great keynote addresses, mentoring, and a panel of prominent leaders that will discuss investing in our network and investing in each other. So our agenda will be as follows. We will get started with our first keynote by Deanna Rodriguez, who's the president and CEO of Energy New Orleans, and she will speak on investing in your network. We will have our mentor circles, which is, I know, usually the favorite part of this event each year. And those will be facilitated by our City Business Past Women of the Year. And then we will have our panel moderated by Sheba Turk. And then we'll end with a keynote address by Crystal Hardy Allen on investing in each other. So we will wrap up today at 11. Anytime during the event, please use the Q&A function or the chat function so we know you're out there. And we'll leave 5 minutes at the end of each keynote to address your questions. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first keynote. So Deanna Rodriguez is President and Chief Executive Officer of Energy New Orleans, where she oversees the company's electric distribution system, safety, financial performance, customer service, resource planning, economic development, charitable contributions, employee development, and regulatory and government affairs. Rodriguez holds a master's degree in public affairs from the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin, and a bachelor's degree in government from the University of Texas at Austin. Deanna, the audience is all yours. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to figure out the technology, so I appreciate you inviting me, Deidre, and I'm really happy to be here. So if I sort of mess this part up, the technology piece part up, just I guess shout through the screen and see if I can figure it out. So I'll do my best. Again, thank you again. I'm Deanna Rodriguez, and I'm super honored to be here today. I looked at the agenda, and the speaker panels are amazing, and the list of participants also. And this morning, I have been asked to speak to you about investing in your network. And, you know, it is so great to meet each of you virtually. So this leads to our first lesson in networking. Lesson 1 is say nice to meet you. Seriously, that rings a little bit funnier when I have an audience to actually listen and laugh. So I hope you're sitting there laughing and enjoying this, because I'm going to try to make this as much fun as possible. I'm going to walk through 5 lessons in networking that I've learned over my career. And I was also asked to share a little bit about myself. So I thought I would do so in the context of the topic that I've been asked to speak on. So please bear with me. I'm going to go through a few of these lessons and then go through a little bit about me in the process. So here we go. We've already talked about lesson 1, and in that is as basic as just say nice to meet you. I think people enjoy sort of the eye contact, and as well as the acknowledgement that they are being seen. And moving on to our second lesson, I'm going to share a little bit about what we already know. And that is that networking is one of the most underrated soft skills that our bosses expect us to be experts in no matter the industry. So they may not call it networking, they may call it educating, and they may call it lobbying, sales, medicine, philanthropy, anything. But whatever you do every day, there's a component of networking. So again, congrats to the conference organizers for recognizing this. It's an important tool and something that we should all be good at. If we're not good at it yet, it takes a lifetime to learn these skills, and it's something that we can all strive to improve on. So I have a story about lesson 2. So my networking skills began early when I was about, 10 or 11 years old, growing up in South Texas. I would spend summers at the pool, because it's as hot down there as it is here, with my older brother, who was forced to take me with him. And I'm sure a lot of folks out there have had this experience. Either you had to drag a little sister or brother along, or you were the one dragged along. Anyway, we'd be at the pool, and he would see a pretty girl and say to me, "Go make friends." So I understood, I'm sorry. I understood that he wanted me to go and make friends so that I could introduce him to her. And that is, once she was my friend, he and I met a lot, that would be an opportunity for him to become her friend too. He and I met a lot of people using this technique. I honed this skill, and I really did. It was, again, something I started young, but I honed the skill working as a legislative staffer at the state capitol in Texas. And then as an analyst when I began at Entergy almost 28 years ago, and as a lobbyist at Entergy. The lesson in this story is lesson 2. Don't make networking so hard. Think of it as making friends. Find something that you have in common. And when so when I was at the pool as a kid, it was probably about swimming, or who knows what. I was a kid. When I was a legislative staffer, it was probably about who could help me figure out a policy problem. And when I was a lobbyist, I'm sure it was about how best to help him or her, state rep or senator or governor staffer, meet the needs of their constituents. In every case, it was about something that we had in common. And please don't take me literally when I say go make friends. I'm not telling you that you have to be friends with everyone. I'm telling you to find that thing that you share in common with your network contacts. It might not be readily apparent that you have something in common. You could be from opposite parts of the globe. You could be there could be a difference in gender. It could be a difference in industry, but we all have something in common. I happen to have dogs, so anybody who asks me about my dogs, I love, right? So it could be something as simple as that. Just find it and see if that's something that draws you together. All right, so moving on. The next 3 lessons 3 through 5, are ones that I always mention when asked to talk to young professionals. They aren't specific to networking. They apply to career building. They apply to just about anything in your life. But they're pretty basic, and I think it goes without saying that it's something that we all need to take into consideration. So the next part of this is, let's say you're at a work event or any event, and you're at a reception and you walk up to someone, or you could be at a meeting, and that person seems less than excited to meet you. So we've all been there, right? This has happened to everyone. It certainly happened to me. As I thought of this lesson, I thought, how can I sort of get across what I'm trying to share with you? So I figured a pop quiz, unfortunately we can't raise hands, I guess, but a pop quiz was in order. So you walk into the room, remember where we're going. We walk into a room and everybody is sort of milling around. Some people know each other. You take that initiative and you walk up to someone. They ignore you or they're not super pleased. Do you A, walk away and say, what a jerk? Do you B, think, wow, I'm not boring? I mean, and he or she doesn't want to talk to me. Do you see, consider, well, maybe he or she, he's having a hard day and it has nothing to do with me. Or D, all of the above. So I want you to think about that for a second. I would tell you, and it's going to be interesting to see which one of you decide which part you want to play in all this, but I would tell you that it's D, because it couldn't be any of those things, right? It could be any of those things. It could be that person is having a hard day. It could be, they haven't thought of networking as, well, let me find something in common with that person. But now that you all are that much more sophisticated, you're going to look at it that way. Or they could be a jerk. I mean, it could be any of those things. So it could be D, right? It should be D. But keep in mind that the lesson three is that it's not always about you. It could have nothing to do with you. That person could have had a bad day. So good, bad, or however that one meeting goes, it's not it's about the meeting and it's not about you. So just keep that one in mind. Looks like we have some chats going on. So I think it's kind of, oh, look here, I want it to be C. So that's, it's all this is interesting. And now I've lost my statement. Hold on a second. All right, so lesson 4 is easy, and it's be nice to everyone, because you don't know who the influencers are. A number of years ago, when I first moved to New Orleans, the first time I worked for the first time, because I've lived, this is my third time. This was before Katrina, and it's been over 20 years. And I worked with our former CEO, Wayne Leonard. He's since passed. But he challenged me with creating the Entergy Charitable Foundation. So I quickly became very popular, as you can imagine. He asked me to pull together the structure by which we would take grant applications. Patty Riddlebarger, my successor, who leads a much more sophisticated organization than I ever did back then for Entergy today, has taken that role on. But I'm so proud that I was there at the beginning. I used to say to people that I could tell how much money people were going to ask for by how long they shook my hand. And obviously this was way before COVID. So the more they wanted, the longer they held my hand. Here's the thing though, we are not our jobs, right? We're all just people. So be nice to each other. People didn't know, if they knew my position, they were nice to me, but they shouldn't have been nice to me just because they knew my position. So you don't know if the person that you don't think is worthy of your network, and I say worthy of your network, might be your next boss. You have no idea. The influencers don't have to have titles, money, or status. Then again, they might have all three, but you just don't know. So here I'm going to take a little break to give you, it's a story about the chicken lady. So, so again, just hang in there. And they might do it here, but I know in Texas, they have something called Governor for a Day. And when the governor and the lieutenant governor are out of the state, a state senator is selected to be governor for the day. So it's a big, it's more of a, what is it? It's more of an opportunity to have a big barbecue on the front lawn of the Capitol. So it's not a real deal thing, but it's a big celebration. So they always set up the tent. They always have the barbecue out, and folks are going through the line, and the state senator is the governor for the day. And so he's walking through the line and he's all excited, and he goes up to, goes to the barbecue line, gets his beans, gets his, potato salad, and now he's there with the chicken. And the lady the server puts one piece of chicken on his plate. And so he says, "I'd like a second piece of chicken." And she goes, "You get one piece of chicken." And he says, "Well, don't you know who I am? I'm the governor for the day, and I want a second piece of chicken." And she says, well, don't you know who I am? And, he just looks at her. She says, I'm the lady in charge of the chicken. You get one piece of chicken. So in that, I kind of refer to the folks that are the gatekeepers and the folks that we don't know and might not recognize as influencers as the chicken ladies. And it could be chicken men, or chicken gentlemen. It's whatever. It's the people in charge of the chicken. So I tell that story often because it is one of those, it's a nice, cute way to describe to folks, anyone, that just be nice. Be nice to the person in charge of the chicken because you might want a second piece. So that was lesson 3. Or I'm sorry, lesson 4. Lesson 5 is the last lesson I'm going to share. And again, this is something that I hope you're recognizing that I'm actually doing right now, which is facing my fears. Lesson 5 is face your fears. I had always been on the external side of our business. So I came up through as an analyst and became a lobbyist, and then did external affairs, also did corporate communications, did the corporate social responsibility post. So I've always done some sort of semblance, and that was what I came up through, right? I got my master's in public affairs. That was what I felt like I was trained to do. And I didn't have a business degree, but I was learning business as I was going. But so I'd always been on the external side. And about a dozen years ago, I was asked by one of my mentors and one of my friends, who in fact, many of you might know, Philip May, who is president and CEO of Entergy Louisiana. He asked me if I was interested in leading the regulatory affairs group for Entergy New Orleans. He was one of a number of people. He was in a different role back then, but he was one of a number of people who was helping in that, seeking out that and filling that role. Anyway, I'd been at the company for a long time by then. So I told him, when he asked me that question, I told him the truth. I said, I don't know if I can do it. And he said, well, why? And I said, well, I have very little direct experience in regulatory. Now, I'd done regulatory policy. I'd done all kinds of things in the company, but I didn't feel like I knew regulatory as well as I should. So he told me, here's what I think you know. He says, I think you know our business. I think you know the company. And I think you know the city and its people. And I thought about it and I took a leap of faith, right? And I trusted him and I faced my fear. So that goes to show that the investment I had made in my network, and this is my internal network, certainly, and my external network, right, across 3 states, across the jurisdictions that I had worked in, helped in building my career. So I may not have known the exact space I was moving into, but I knew people who did. I knew who to ask. I knew where to go ask for help. I knew where to go ask for, assistance. I knew who to go ask questions. I mean, we all have a lot of questions, but I had that built-in internal network and external network and really kind people helping me and pushing me along the way. So when I started about the face your fears, I have a fear about talking about myself. so especially in this audience. So I was also told that the only way to improve in public speaking is to just keep doing it. So maybe that's a lesson 6, right? The only way to improve in networking is just to keep trying and keep introducing yourself and going up to those tough and putting yourself up in those tough situations. Do it where you walk into a reception and say, okay, I'm going to meet 3 people. If you say 3 people, even if it's 1, just do it, get it over with. Then you can take a deep breath, cross it off your list and say, okay, fine, I did that. But face your fears. So now, because I am the proud daughter of 2 public school teachers, 2 educators, I'm going to do my part in summarizing the lessons for today. I would say lesson 1 is say nice to meet you. Lesson 2 is don't make networking so hard. Think of it as making friends. Lesson 3 is it's not always about you. That's a good one for anything. Lesson 4 is be nice to everyone because you really don't know who the influencers are. And lesson 5 is face your fears. So again, this is probably the most I've talked about myself in a long time, certainly in public. So I hope I didn't bore you. More than that, I hope that you will find a time to introduce yourself to someone today by text, by phone, by email, add to your network, check on them, say how you're doing, make sure they're doing okay, and share a little bit of yourself with them. So I hope that's it. That's all I've got. If I don't know where we go next, if anyone has any questions.
Sure. Thanks, Deanna, so much. And so nice to meet you this morning virtually. We did get a question through the Q&A that I would love to get your input on. So thank you for your stories. You mentioned one of your mentors. What advice would you give to younger rising professionals as they work to find mentors and sponsors?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think first of all, you need to ask, right? So, and I would tell you, everybody has their own way of doing this. So I don't want to pretend I know how best to do this. My mentors and my sponsors, and remember those are and champions, you want all three. You want somebody who can help you. You want sort of puzzle through your world. You also want somebody who can champion you and say, here, you need champions. You need people to vouch for you and say, hey, go look at this person, right? This is a great person. But I would tell you that I think it's done more organically. I think that if you try to go find someone and you pick them out, and this is just me, and I've been on the receiving end and the both sides. It's hard when somebody comes to you and says, hey, you want to be my mentor? And you're like, well, I don't even know you very well. And it depends if they're in my same industry, if I have a connection, maybe if they have dogs, here we go again. If we have something in common, perhaps that would be something that I could do. And the same goes for when I've asked for people to guide me. Sometimes it's really ask them a question about a problem and see if it works, because they'll give you advice. And if they give you advice, that might be something that's helpful to you. So I would suggest you not take it so formally or make it so formally, because I think sometimes it gets stilted with that formality. That's just me. Again, everybody's different. You have to work with your strengths.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you again for being here this morning. We appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks.
All right. So now it is time for our mentor circles. So as you all know, mentoring is at the core of this event. And this morning we have some really amazing women in each of our breakout rooms to lead our mentor circles. So these women are leaders in their industries and have an abundance of knowledge and experience to share with you this morning. So please use this time to really dive into the discussion topics, share your experiences, and most importantly, make some lasting connections. The session will focus on investing in your network and investing in each other. And it will last until 10 this morning. So please enjoy your time together. So just a reminder, you can join the mentor circles by clicking the link that we sent to you via email. And we are also going to put it into the chat. So you will join, we're in a webinar right now. You'll join a regular Zoom so that we can have breakout rooms, and then you'll come back to the webinar to conclude the event. So thank you so much. And don't forget to come back so that you can hear our amazing panel, as well as our second keynote. Have a great morning. We'll see you in a little while. Thank you. All right. As they start to come in, I will just go ahead and kick us off. So I hope everyone's enjoying the Empower 2021 event so far this morning. And thank you so much for joining us back in the main session. So we are thrilled to have Sheba Turk back with us again. It's the third year. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. And I'm so honored to introduce Sheba. She co-anchors WWL TV's Eyewitness Morning News and is the author of the book Off Air, My Journey to the Anchor Desk. Sheba's inspirational book lets readers in on how the New Orleans-born anchor worked her way from working behind the scenes in a newsroom to the anchor desk in just about 2 years. Sheba is an alumnus of the Soledad O'Brien's Pow Herfall Foundation and mentors with organization. She is passionate about helping other people, especially other young women, reach their full potential. Sheba, thank you so much. And the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So happy to be back with you all. Of course, everything is virtual during these pandemic times, but I'm so glad that we can continue these important conversations. Empower 2021 is all about investing in our future. And I'm excited for our next conversation because we have some powerhouses with us. They're going to talk about investing in ourselves, investing in our dreams, and investing in each other. And we have the perfect people for that conversation. Because it is virtual, I'm going to keep these introductions short, and we'll learn more about our panelists as we talk today. So we have Delary Rice, who is the Senior Director of Special Projects for Governor John Bell Edwards. Give us a wave. Hi, Delary. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
Dr. Nigel Giergra is the Chief Wellness Officer at Ochsner Health. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Michelle Johnston is the Executive Coach and Gaston Chair of Business at Loyola. Lovely to see you.
Good morning.
And Sunny LaBeouf is the City Attorney for New Orleans for Mayor Cantrell, the 2020 City Business Woman of the Year as well. So congratulations to you, even though we're a year behind. It's huge. So glad to have you joining us for this panel.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, let's jump right into this conversation. Delary, I'm going to begin with you. Our first topic is going to be investing in each other. Governor John Bell Edwards and the First Lady have made a public commitment to Louisiana children and families. Tell us about an effort that you were involved with that really shows how everyone benefits when we invest in other people.
Sure, absolutely. So there really have been several policies enacted during the Edwards administration that invest in children and families. The governor and first lady have made that a priority, and I think they've showed that through the legislation that they've passed, starting off with Medicaid expansion, which was executed the first day he took office. An additional 300,000 Louisianans were able to get health care under that order. And since then, there have been budget increases for teacher pay, early childhood education, and health, including another teacher pay raise this session. One extremely impactful piece of legislation is that I was involved in personally was raising the age of foster youth from 18 to 21. At the time we were working on that, I had a son who was 17, and it was very difficult to imagine saying, oh, okay, here's your paperwork and have a nice life. Hope everything works out for you. And so this enabled those youth to be able to stay connected with the system and to receive the supports that are available through that, as well as have healthcare through the Medicaid system. And so that was a big deal. And then in this year's session, we passed the teacher trauma training law. And this will provide educators and school counselors introductory training to ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experience Model. And this way teachers can be aware of the signs of trauma, which could include anything from abuse or neglect to chronic hunger. And there really is a national movement around trauma. And if we can approach policies and interacting with others through that space of perhaps this person has a backstory that we don't know, then I think that that makes us all more compassionate and able to serve people better.
Yeah, I think those are two really great examples. Of course, I can't imagine how many lives you have changed just with those policies. Thanks so much for sharing that. Sunny, I'd like you to jump in here. As we said, you were the City Business Woman of the Year for last year. Congratulations again. So when we talk about making an impact, you're definitely doing that. Tell us though, if someone comes to you, young people often say, listen, I want to make an impact. I want to make a difference in the world. What is your advice for doing that?
No, absolutely. I think that mentoring is so important to all that we do in terms of giving back. And certainly I try to live by the adage, lift as you climb. And the advice that I always give to young people who want to have an impact is to, one, never discount their singular power. The power of one is amazing. And I think sometimes we discount that and think, well, I'm just one person. Well, there have been so many occasions throughout history where just one person has impacted a movement or has helped to change policy or to do something that was believed to be impossible. So the greatest advice that I can give to a young person who is interested in making an impact is to, one, not discount their singular power, and to two, be well versed on the issues where they want to make an impact, do their homework, do their research, and allow their passion to move and dictate who they speak with, how they speak with them, and to really be immersed in the issue that they want to have an impact with, and to not be afraid to reach out to our elected leaders who are accountable to the people that they serve. It matters. I think that Governor John Bell Edwards, Mayor LaToya Cantrell here in New Orleans, and really all of our elected officials, they want to hear from each of us to know what issues are important to us, and it does help to move the needle.
Yeah, I definitely love that. And that is so important. You get excited, you want to make changes, but you have to know the history and research of what you're talking about before you can move forward into the future. Great points there. Dr. Nigel, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now. Of course, as this pandemic is lifting, things are starting to return to normal. We heard so many people during this pandemic say they felt like they were stuck, right? They didn't have time to work on their goals. They were just trying to move forward. What is your advice for people now that the world is reopening to get back to setting their sights on the future and setting new goals?
Sheba, we're not in fight or flight mode anymore like we were in the first wave of the pandemic. But things to me just don't feel right yet. We're drained, or at least I'm drained. In healthcare, we're seeing some disturbing trends with burnout, PTSD, and depression. And I think there's this other neglected middle child of mental health called languishing. Adam Grant coined that. And it's sort of not depression, but not quite flourishing. It's sort of feeling kind of blah, lack of motivation. And the cure for being stuck, I think, is, finding flow, getting into the moment, not fearing the future, not ruminating about the past. And the key to finding flow is finding activities that bring you joy or purpose, whether that's hobbies, whether that's activities that bring you satisfaction, whether that's just finding something passionate about that you do at work, I think.
I like that. Getting back into a flow. It is. We've gotten out of so many routines and habits that you kind of lose track of doing things that you'd like to do to be productive. Michelle, I'd like you to join the conversation now. I kept those intros short because we are virtual. We want everybody to stick with us for the conversation. But I do want you to talk about your book, which is coming out this fall. Tell us about it, please.
Oh, it's super exciting. Yes. So I'm very fortunate. Not only do I get to work with undergraduates and MBA students, but I get to coach really fabulous executives and a lot of executives at Ochsner. And through my years, I've compiled all of the data of the leaders who absolutely soared and the leaders who failed. And had a big aha moment. In 1 year, 3 of the executives I was coaching lost their jobs.
Wow.
And so I had to take a hard look at myself and at the data. And what the data showed is that they were not connected with themselves at all. So each of those leaders appeared and came across as inauthentic. And so my book is called The Seismic Shift in Leadership, because we're in a shift. It's no longer the command and control and kind of creating cultures of fear. That is not effective, does not work. It is all about connection. And it's truly connecting with yourself so that you can be authentic and passionate and have purpose, connection with your team, really making meaningful connections, asking what Nigel encourages leaders to say, how are you doing really? Caring about the person on a personal level. So that's what the whole book is about. The seismic shift in leadership is really this shift towards meaningful connection.
I love that. I'm glad you brought Dr. Nigel back into the conversation, because I'd like you to weigh in here. You mentioned that burnout. You mentioned folks just feeling like, I don't have anything left to give. How do you overcome that feeling? Because I know some people have set their minds and said, I'm ready to move forward, but they really just can't get over that feeling.
Well, I mean, I guess that gets to resilience. I do think there's something to intrinsic hardiness that vary from individual to individual, but I do believe that resilience is a learned skill. I heard somebody say last year that we're currently in a human energy crisis, and there's this mismatch between demand on our energy and the energy that's in the tank.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, resilience is not about avoiding stress. Stress is everywhere. It's about managing stress and growing from that stress, and it's about managing the four components of our energy tank. So that's the physical dimension, and you do that with, you know, movement, exercise, nutrition, rest, sleep. Yeah, the mental aspect of our energy tank, and that's to the extent possible being in the moment. The emotional dimension, so that would be, you know, trying to connect as much as possible with those that you love, your family. And then the spiritual dimension, and that's really finding purpose, to Michelle's point, purpose in your life, purpose in what you do at work. And I use the analogy to athletes. Athletes don't avoid stress. They balance stress, but the key to balancing stress is balancing stress with recovery. So stress plus recovery allows you to grow. And I think at least in healthcare, we're not too good at the recovery part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much for weighing in on that. I think so many people are trying to balance the stress and recovery. And right now we just got the stress part down pat. So we need to work on the other part. When we speak of resiliency, which I'm so glad you brought up, and recovery, Sunny, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation. As city attorney, we can only imagine the disasters and things that you respond to. I read about them on the news, so I know a little bit. I can't imagine what it feels like handling all of that as the attorney. But of course, there's been a building collapse, cyber attack, pandemic. It goes on and on and on. How do you bounce back from setback after setback, especially when you're in a position when only the setbacks come to you? They're only calling you when something bad is happening.
That's right. I was just sharing on yesterday with a group that in my role as city attorney, particularly over the last, we'll say, year to year and a half, I believe that it is comparable to being a firefighter. So I am now
They're only calling you when it's burning.
as well, because we are constantly putting out fires. But what I would say is the most important way that I've been able to accomplish resilience over the last year and a half is through, one, compartmentalizing what's happening around me and prioritizing. I had the honor of serving in the federal government, and I remember a military colleague referenced that we have to operate nearest threat first. So prioritizing in terms of identifying what is the nearest threat and what is the plan to address it. That certainly has allowed me to be resilient in how I've responded to those multiple disasters over the last year and a half. Being thoughtful, and for me, writing it all down, figuring out what are those priorities, the plan of action, how am I going to use my human capital, the people around me, to best respond to what is happening, is also important to allow for resilience. And certainly exercise, meditation, and sometimes there's so much happening that just breathing is a form of meditation for me that allows me to be resilient. Just, you know, if I am trying to get to sleep and I can't because there's so much happening, just taking a moment to be thoughtful about my breathing so that I can be resilient and do what I like to say, or I like to describe as Control, Alt, Delete. We need to reset and begin again tomorrow. And so I do a lot of that to remain resilient. And then most importantly, spending time with my family and compartmentalizing that. That is our time together. And I believe strongly in living out our values and living out our priorities. And my priority will always be my family. And so when I'm with my family, really making sure that I'm present in the moment. And that also helps me to Control, Alt, Delete, which is how I continue to be resilient. And so those are just a few of the ways that I've been able to manage and be resilient through multiple disasters. But I think that same advice would transition to dealing with just complex and difficult issues at work or in your personal life. Prioritizing nearest threat first, and certainly making exercise and meditation and whatever it is that is your priority, family or other, being able to focus and be present in those moments.
All right, Sonny, you're dropping gems. I love when the entire panel virtually were all nodding together, especially when you said just breathe. Like you literally sometimes in a day, I'm like, oh, maybe if I breathe, it would be fine, right? Like I just haven't taken a breath in a while. You also said something else that I think is very helpful, writing, like to give yourself accountability, because I have a lot of thoughts in a day and I find I don't follow through with them unless I actually have written it down somewhere to hold myself accountable. So thanks for sharing all those things. Delary, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now about investing in yourself, about being resilient. You've had so many different roles, banker, disability advocate. We talked about your role now with the governor. Talk about how you manage all those different roles and made the change between them, because I think this is also very relevant in the pandemic. So many people had awakenings that they were not doing what they wanted to do. They're ready to make a shift and they don't know how to do that.
Sure. So, interestingly, although all those things sound like they're not connected, they really are. And um, I think my career just followed this natural trajectory. And so I have an undergraduate finance degree, and I started out working at a bank. And about a year and a half into that, one of my supervisors there was tapped to create the department that oversaw the new Community Reinvestment Act. And so she asked me to go with her, and that kind of shifted my focus to community and nonprofit service, and I've just stayed with that. Even I was at home with my boys for about 4 years, and I'm sorry, about 15 years, and I really stayed connected through volunteering and giving back that way. And so when I re-entered the workforce, I was naturally drawn to nonprofit work, and that's kind of where it started. And my disability work came from my fourth son has Down syndrome, and I was just kind of like, wait, what? That's how it works? That doesn't make sense. And so I found some like-minded people, and they pulled me in that direction, and went that way. But I think that it's really true that if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. And I really enjoy my job. I've enjoyed all the jobs that I've had. And it's not really just the work itself and the great people, but I really enjoy the challenge of figuring out solution to a concern or a problem. And I'm also a lifelong learner. Um, my kids just refer to me as a nerd, which I'm constantly finding something to indulge in. And I really enjoy the process of learning. And with technology today, even if you don't feel you have the time or the money to invest in formally advancing a degree or your education, there are so many classes that are available online for free, and some of them from the top elite universities. So I'm a big believer in growth and change, and education and training, taking advantage of those when you can find them is really one path to make that happen.
Yeah, I love that. Using your skills as a lifelong learner to transition from one thing to the next. That, as you said, is driven by a natural interest or response to something that you need to be fixed. Very helpful. Michelle, I'm interested in what you have to say for this part of the conversation about resiliency, because you talked to us about working with executives and leaders. So you've seen what works and what doesn't work, not just from your personal narrative, but from the people you've worked with and are now writing this book about. So kind of tell us what you've seen from that aspect.
Absolutely. My biggest piece of advice is give up perfection.
Mm.
What I have seen is that perfection equates to disconnection. So if you're trying to be perfect, you end up putting up a wall between you and others, right? And so people don't really enjoy working with other people who just have to be perfect. I mean, y'all, I actually had pretty good hair today before I walked my dogs right before this.
So beautiful.
I walked back in, I'm like, it just really at the end of the day doesn't matter, right? You want to be human, you want to be real, right? So that's my biggest piece of advice that I've learned. And I was able to give up perfection. And a lot of these high achieving women on this call today, I'm sure, can relate to that you just have to give yourself permission to be imperfect, to have flaws. Sometimes you're going to make mistakes. And if you want to be an innovative organization, if you want to be a leader that cultivates innovation, you have to allow for mistakes. So again, even as a leader, you have to allow that other people on your team are going to make mistakes, which is imperfection, right? So my biggest piece of advice is give up that perfection and give yourself permission. Like, it's okay sometimes. And I wouldn't even use the word fail. I would just say, it's okay sometimes to stumble. It's okay to make mistakes. We are human. So permission and giving up perfection.
I love that, giving some space for things to go wrong because we all know that they will, right? It's how you bounce back from that. Dr. Najo, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation. Sunny kind of brought up family, brought up taking that break. Everyone's kind of said, like, listen, you got to reset your priorities and know where you're focused on and know how to shift between those things. How do you find balance though, especially in a world where like it's very common for people to brag about doing 15 things and 10 things. Sometimes they literally just don't all fit into a day. How do you find balance?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Michelle for the imperfection plug. I didn't realize my background was going to be on display, so you can see my messy office. But I just loved what Sunny had to say on this, and she spoke about it so eloquently. Mm-hmm. I struggle with this, I'll be honest, but balance is really knowing yourself and managing yourself. And you certainly, you can't manage others unless you're kind of managing yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's about, as Sunny said, it's about setting your priorities. And then once you've found those priorities, it's about setting boundaries. What are you not going to do? And that's really hard. Earlier, I talked about managing the energy supply and the 4 dimensions of the energy supply chain. But this is actually, boundary setting is really managing demands on your energy, right? Mm-hmm. So, and being intentional about that. So whether that, is putting away your smartphone between 6 and 9 and sort of saying to your kids, I'm not going to be answering texts or, on Facebook. I mean, that's easier said than done. I have asked in the past my admin assistant to actually make sure that on evenings there are dates that, say exercise, so it's, that you're telling your folks that you work with that these sorts of things are important to you. So again, it's, and you're not always going to be perfect at this, as Michelle said, but just, go ahead and take the first step. Try something, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. We only have a few minutes left, so I do want to shift the topic a little bit. Sunny, this is something you kind of brought up earlier as well, mentoring the women who were coming behind you. You have obviously enough stuff to do. How do you, A, find the time to do that? Teach others to find time to help those coming behind them when they feel they have too much to balance. How do you do that?
Well, first, I do it because I make it a priority. So many amazing and wonderful women who are leaders and men who are leaders as well have taken time to invest in me when they probably didn't have time to do it. Mm-hmm. And so it's my obligation and responsibility to pass that forward and to continue to invest. And I think I shared it earlier. I have tried to live by the adage, lift as you climb. And there's just so much information that comes out of experience. And I think it's incumbent upon us to share that with younger professionals who are interested in doing what we're doing. So what I will often do is try to carve out time for coffee, and I encourage others to invite people to coffee who are doing what they want to do. It can be a 10 to 15 minute interaction where you can really get some important and impactful information. And mentoring is just so important that I've made it a priority. And every time I meet with a young person, law student or young professional, I always tell them, don't ever count yourself out. I think sometimes, particularly as women, we will count ourselves out. If it's something that you want to do, put yourself in the game, put yourself in the race, and let someone else tell you no. But don't ever exclude yourself. You're worthy. You're enough. And so that would be my advice to everyone that I mentor and to any young professionals here listening. Don't count yourself out. You're enough. Keep grinding, keep working. You'll get there.
I love that so much. As someone who found my personal path because a mentor took the time, right, to speak with me, I am always, encouraging people that find the time to do that. You're literally changing people's lives and helping them find their own passion. And Michelle, a lot of times people want a mentor. They want someone because it's all about advice, right? Giving them the best advice. You guys have already given us some amazing advice today. I've taken like 15 notes myself. So let's try a different question. What is the worst piece of advice you've ever given? I'll give you a second to think. The worst piece I ever got was honestly, don't quit, because I learned in life, if you don't like something, if it's not for you, you need to learn when to throw the towel in. So what's the worst piece of advice you were ever given?
Oh, wow. I remember when I was a 28-year-old brand new professor in the College of Business, and I asked some of the other professors who received the big awards, help me, how can I be successful? And they're like, do this and do that. And you got to be so tough and kick them out of the classroom when they're late. And so I became this totally different person. That was awful. That was the worst advice. I needed to be me. And it wasn't until I actually accepted that I think I can be myself in the classroom. And I think I see some of my students on this call and they can attest to that. That's when I actually started winning faculty awards, not when I was trying to be somebody else.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Just be yourself. That is true. People will give you advice of what works for them. That's not necessarily your style or what works for you. I love that you shared that. Delary, why don't you jump in here and talk about what has been your key to achieving the success that you desire so that other people can kind of find the keys that will help them get to their goals?
Sure. So I think that part of the work that I do is about advocating and listening at the same time, and listening to what others have to say is such a big part of that. I think that is a gift that you can give yourself. When I was younger, and I have a sister and two brothers, and they would tell you this is true, but I had this little issue where I thought I was right all the time. and I carried that with me in the beginning of my career. And I remember thinking, I have a degree. Like, how could you possibly think, but the one of the best gifts I gave myself was to listen to what others had to say. And especially when you're dealing with communities that are vast, or in a workplace where there are lots of issues, what you might perceive as the biggest issue may only be your perception. And that doesn't discount that that's true, but it also may not mean that everyone else is experiencing that as well. And so I think listening to others is really a good way to move things forward.
Beautiful. I love that. And just so you guys know, I've been looking at the chat while we're talking. People are loving what you all have to say. So thanks for this great advice. We have less than a minute left, and I'm going to end with Dr. Nigel, because I think if we've learned anything in this pandemic, reaching your goals, being forward thinking is all very important, but none of it matters if you don't have your health and your mental health as well. So I'd like to give you the last word on that.
Sure. Yeah, I've been very interested in the subject of mental health as we emerge from the pandemic, and destigmatizing mental health, but we can talk about that another time. So wellness, Shiva, isn't simply the lack of disease. It's thriving. So, like, for instance, we talked about mental health. It's not just not having depression or PTSD. It's about getting, as I said, from languishing to flourishing. Physical health isn't just the absence of like congestive heart failure or chronic disease. It's sort of thriving and being healthy. Financial wellness is just not about not being bankrupt. So, I think you just have to look for opportunities. Trust your instincts. But the key, and I've been, at fault sometimes, is just not procrastinating. So. Just trying not to get stuck, taking the first step. There are opportunities out there. It's just, daring yourself to be a little uncomfortable and, taking the first step.
Yeah, very important, and a great note to end on. Our session is over. I want to thank you all so much for this conversation and your insight, Dr. Nigel, Michelle, Delary, and Sunny. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to plug Michelle's book one more time, The Seismic Shift in Leadership. It will be out this fall, right?
That's right. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sheba. And thank you so much to our panel. You can see in the chat so many nuggets and useful information for us to take away from this. So really appreciate you guys being here, and y'all have a great day. And we will keep moving along with our programming. So to close us out this morning, we are honored to have Crystal Hardy-Allen as our keynote on investing in each other. Crystal Allen is the founder and CEO of K. Allen Consulting, which is an education advocate and a young philanthropist. A well-respected former school teacher and principal, Crystal humbly leads what has now become a global management consulting firm that provides customized workshops, coaching, and strategic planning services for businesses, nonprofits, and school systems within the US, India, South Africa, Nigeria, and Canada. To date, K Allen Consulting has served over 150 clients across 5 countries and impacted over 60,000 students across the schools it's supported over time, and contributed nearly 100,000 of its revenue over the span of 4 years directly to individuals, organizations, and causes that advance equity and justice for Black and Brown communities. So thank you so much, Crystal, for being here, and it's all yours. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank each of you for this incredible opportunity to be here. I had the opportunity to join a breakout room earlier for the mentor circles, and am really grateful that I did. I am really thinking so much about what it means to invest in one another. And from the point of inclusion as a frame. And so there are just a couple of things that I want to share this morning that I think are really, really important as we think about the journey that everyone is taking to think about investment, right? But specifically investment in other people. I think that the first thing that comes to mind is the importance of understanding that investing in other people is connected to us being super clear about what we want our leadership legacy to be. At the end of the day, what do you want to be known for? Being clear also about the impact and the change that you want to leave on other people. And when we think about being young professionals, especially all of the women that are thinking about the barriers and the injustices that women over time have faced, even especially when we think about marginalized groups within that, such as women of color, I think that there's a moral question of what will my dent be in making this a more just world? And how will my work and my contributions change the narrative of what can be true for all women, right? And so I think when we start from a place of clearly vision setting, what we want our impact and our legacy to be, everything else can follow suit from that in terms of us being incredibly intentional about how we move, the decisions we make, the organizations that we join, who we choose to connect and spend our time with. I think the second thing that's important to think about is when we talk about investing in other people and leveraging inclusion as a pathway to do that, it's important to know that in a day and age in which even the acronym diversity, equity, inclusion is so frequently used that we have to make sure that we're thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion from a global standpoint that is very intersectional. In other words, when we hear the word diversity, that we not automatically think about race. Racial diversity is a type of diversity, but when we think about diversity, to think about all different types of social identity markers, whether it is gender, race, religion, whether it is personality types, geographic origin, where people are from, linguistic diversity, all of those things. And to understand that a part of the work of investing in other people is making sure that we constantly center the representation of different people, right? The question of who's present in this space, who is not present in this space? What voices am I hearing in this moment? Whose voice am I not hearing? Who has an inherent advantage in this particular policy or this particular practice that I, my department, my team, and my organization are enacting, and who is at an inherent disadvantage with this particular policy as is, or this practice? Those are questions that we have to ask ourselves when we think about whether or not we are investing in other people by making sure that other people are being represented. I think a third thing that comes to mind, and I jotted a few notes because I didn't want to miss anything, is really thinking about investing in other people in terms of providing access to opportunities and resources. Because inclusion is not just the question of, do you have a seat at the table? It's actually thinking, are we giving folks access to power? Are we giving folks access to decision making? Are we giving people access to the resources and the opportunities they need to not just be there, but to thrive? We are not leaning into anything that is performative, that is about checking a box to say, yes, we have more women here, or yes, we have more Black folks here, or yes, we have more Latinx folks here, or yes, we have more Native New Orleanians here. Is it about saying, do we have a very diverse, inclusive group of folks that are present, but are they in varying tiers of our institutions, of our decisions, of the policies that are being made? If I'm going to make a policy, for instance, that is for young moms, have I asked young moms what they actually need? Or am I projecting an assumption that I believe that I know what they need without centering them as my community and my key stakeholders? So I think when we talk about investing in other people, we have to really say, you know, how am I investing not in a cosmetic way or in a symbolic way, but in an actual way that's going to move the needle to change outcomes for this particular group or for the people that I'm inviting into the room. I also say that because, you know, when we think about gender diversity, for instance, you can see over time how some institutions have brought more women into the space, but they're not truly included if I am at the table, but I'm overtopped. I'm at the table, but I'm undermined. I'm at the table, but my voice doesn't hold as much weight as someone else's, right? And so we have to really think about, you know, inclusion from a fourth standpoint of what I wanted to share around the experiences and the treatment that people have. So for us as professionals, no matter what context we're, you know, in and find ourselves in, I think we have to be mindful of how and to what degree we are making sure that people feel seen, making sure they feel heard, they feel appreciated and valued. And that's a human sense of belonging that everyone actually needs. But it is important to say, just because I feel seen, just because I feel heard and I feel valued, do I have social awareness to understand who around me in this space may not be experiencing this space the way that I am? And with that awareness, what do I do with it? How can I advocate? How can I be an ally? How can I ensure that I'm not just okay, that other people are okay with me? And I, you know, last but not least, will just say that I think this connects to this broader question of who am I making room for? You know, at the end of the day, it's not enough for me to win. It's not enough for me to succeed. What happens when we all win? What happens when I recognize there's room for many more people? That I think pushes us to lean into a mindset of collaboration versus competition. Right. And with that in mind, I think, again, all of those things combined that I shared, one, being clear on what is my vision for impacting other people. Have I thought about it? Have I thought about the legacy that I want to leave? Two, really understanding that I have to think broadly about representation in many different fronts and what's present and what's not. Three, being mindful of the access to resources and opportunities that I can either provide to someone else, advocate for someone else, or if I'm a gatekeeper, open the gates to provide other people access to. Also thinking about, you know, inclusion from a standpoint of people's treatment and their experiences, like combining all of those things, I think is important because at the end of the day, I'm mindful of a quote from Dr. Maya Angelou, who once said, people may forget what you say, people may forget what you do, but people will never, ever forget the way you make them feel. And so I've said a lot, and I know that we wanted to allot some time for Q&A. So I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to do that. Again, especially in the climate that we're living in. Am I thinking of representation? Am I thinking of inclusion? And am I thinking of equity in terms of outcomes? Are the outcomes changing, or are my actions in ways cosmetic, but not actually changing the needle of outcomes for different people that I can be investing in?
Thanks, Crystal. And I'll just open it up to the audience. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat. We did have Great comments for you. Just how your discussion on DEI and what it means and what it should include was very thorough and inclusive and connects us all. I love your comment on making room for people. I think that's fantastic. I guess, one question I'll just, while we're warming up the audience, I'll put a question to you. So, when we talk about DEI, I think sometimes people are uncomfortable having the conversations in the workplace. How do you get people more comfortable? How do people get started? Create that culture of inclusivity?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. I think number one, it's important to recognize the need for community agreements and norms for engagement in such dialogue. And there are a lot of readily available, tools and frameworks online that folks, can leverage for sure. But I think similar to any other meeting space where a team is thinking, what are our norms for this space, like being present, doing this, doing that. It's important to understand that when we enter conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, we have to enter with a clear set of norms. One, that is very popular and it is very important to center is that we can expect non-closure. That this is not a conversation that people are going to go in with a perfect, pretty checklist to say, boom, in 90 minutes, we solved every single diversity, equity, inclusion issue, right? But I also think that having this inclination towards action is right in the sense that we want to make sure that organizations, as they are fostering conversations, really do three things. And this is, Deidre, founded in a framework from Dr. Barbara J. Love. It's called Liberatory Consciousness. And the framework entails the fact that institutions have to move from awareness to analysis to action and accountability. And that framework for me centers every single component of DEI work our firm does with anyone, clients like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, you name it, to nonprofit orgs too, is that you have to create space for everyone's awareness to be built because everyone comes in with a form of bias. Even as a first generation college graduate that is a Black woman, I still carry biases, right? That everyone has learning and unlearning to do so that the space can be psychologically safe for people. Because if I come into the space feeling like there's nothing for me to learn, then I'm already checked out and I have a barrier. And then other folks are coming to this space afraid to talk because if I say this word, I'm gonna say the wrong thing and then being painted the wrong way. So it's like, how do you create an environment where everyone can lean into learning? Because there is something, whether we're talking about race, gender, sexual orientation, LGBTQIA community, there's so many aspects of social identity that no one can say that they are 100% expert at, right? And I think that humility allows people to lean in to say, what can I learn? How can I analyze myself and our organization? And then how can I take what I'm learning in this analysis and convert it to action and change?
I love that. Awareness, analysis, action.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one more question, Crystal. Social awareness is an amazing insight. Would love for you to expand a little more on how leaders can continue to develop and implement this in their business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned that because I really do think that emotional intelligence as a whole is an important leadership competency. And when we think about the 4 aspects of emotional intelligence, they are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And so I think that in business, our ability to be self-aware looks like understanding our leadership styles, understanding as a leader your conflict orientation, because there are 5 different conflict orientations. And so how we show up as a leader has a lot to do with even our background, our upbringing, right? And what we even associate with conflict. Working chemistry, there are just so many aspects of just saying, do I know myself as a leader and how am I communicating that to other people around me so they're not having to do this guesswork of reading my mind or finding out the hard way that that's how I show up and that's what I value as a leader. I think the self-management for us as leaders is that communication piece for sure, but it's also being brutally honest about doing the self-work as a leader. right? I think there's a lot of vulnerability, a lot more vulnerability that sometimes we can practice in honesty with ourselves to say, what am I not asking for help in as a leader that I need to be asking for help in? And as a leader, where am I getting in my own way? And as a leader, when do I need to step aside? Because leadership is not always being the person in the front with the limelight, but also knowing when I need to step back and build the capacity of my team to really lead in a very dynamic way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Crystal. We really appreciate you being here this morning. I think got a lot of really positive feedback and comments in the chat if you want to check those out. Thanks for being here and thanks for closing us out. We like to finish strong and that's why we have you here. So.
Thank you so much for being so kind. I'll drop my contact information here too, but I really appreciate what you shared and I'll add a little more in the chat. Y'all take care and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yes. Thanks for being here and thank you everybody for participating. That concludes our agenda for the day. So another successful Empower because of each and every one of you. And I want to welcome Lisa Flossman back, our senior group publisher for New Orleans City Business, to close us out for the day. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Deidre. We would like to once again thank our sponsors, Ochsner Health, Entergy New Orleans, Fisher Phillips, Gulf Coast Bank and Trust, and Loyola University New Orleans Women's Leadership Academy, as well as our speakers, panel members, City Business Women of the Year mentors, Larry and all the JA board members in attendance for their support of this event, the JA staff for being a great partner and helping make this event a success, and the City Business team. Thank you all, and we hope you will join us in person in 2022.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.